This dot is you, and this is Pluto, a frozen rock floating on the edge of our solar system. Total surface area, 16.7 million square kilometers. And this is Russia. Total surface area, 17.1 million square kilometers. Yeah, Russia is literally bigger than a planet. It spans 11 time zones. When a Russian person in Kaliningrad is waking up for breakfast, a Russian person in Kamchatka is already thinking about dinner. But here is the question that keeps geographers awake at night. Russia didn't start big. It started here, a tiny, muddy wooden trading post in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by enemies who wanted them dead. So, how did a swampy underdog accidentally conquer the world? Was it genius strategy? Was it divine intervention? Nope. It was mostly because of this little guy, and a terrifying fear of wide-open spaces. To understand Russia, you have to understand its biggest nightmare being flat. Like, really, really flat. This is the North European plain. It's a superhighway for armies. If you are France, you have the Alps. If you are Britain, you have the ocean. If you are Russia, you have grass. Just a lot of grass. For centuries, living in Moscow was like living in a house with no doors, no walls, and a sign on the lawn that said, "Free loot inside." The Vikings came. The Poles came. The Lithuanians came. But the ones who really gave Russia PTSD? The Mongols. In the 13th century, the Mongols rolled in and basically said, "Nice place. We'll take it." They burned Kiev. They enslaved the population. And they forced the Russian princes to pay tribute for over 200 years. This trauma changed Russia's DNA forever. They realized a simple, brutal truth about geopolitics. Rule number 1, the only way to be safe is to push your enemies as far away as possible. If you don't have mountains to protect you, you must create a buffer zone. You need land, lots of land. So if an army wants to kill you, they have to march through 1,000 miles of mud and snow to get there. It's called strategic depth, or, as I like to call it, making the invaders die of hypothermia before they reach your house. Enter this guy, Ivan the Vierte, also known as Ivan the Terrible. Fun fact, in Russian, Grozny actually means fearsome or formidable, but Ivan the Awesome didn't stick. Ivan had a problem. To the east, the old Mongol Empire had shattered into smaller pieces, but they were still raiding Russia, stealing people, and generally being annoying neighbors. So Ivan did something new. He used gunpowder. In 1552, Ivan conquered Kazan. Then Astrakhan. Boom. Just like that, Russia controlled the entire Volga River. This was huge. For the first time, Russia wasn't the victim. They were the predator. But Ivan looked at the map and saw something interesting beyond the Ural Mountains. Siberia. 5 million square miles of nothing. Just snow, trees, bears, and... Wait, what is that? That, my friends, is a sable. It looks like a cute ferret. But to a 16th century Russian, that animal was basically a walking stack of $100 bills. You see, Europe was in the middle of a little ice age. It was freezing. Everyone wanted fur coats. And Russia had run out of fur-bearing animals because they hunted them all. But Siberia? Siberia was crawling with them. They called it soft gold. And just like the American gold rush, people went crazy. The Tsar didn't have the money to invade Siberia himself. So he outsourced it. He gave the rights to the Stroganov family, basically the Jeff Bezos of salt and fur trading. The Stroganovs hired a private army of Cossacks. Think of Cossacks as Russian cowboys. But instead of horses and revolvers, they had riverboats and anger issues. Their leader was Yermak Timofeyevich. In 1581, Yermak took 840 guys and crossed the Ural Mountains to fight the Khanate of Sibir. It sounds like a suicide mission. 800 guys against an empire? But the locals were using bows and arrows. The Cossacks had guns. It was a slaughter. Yermak defeated the Khan and claimed the land for the Tsar. Yermak actually died shortly after, drowning in a river because his armor was too heavy. But he had opened the floodgates. What happened next is one of the fastest expansions in human history. We're talking manifest destiny on steroids. The Russians didn't build roads. They used rivers. Siberia is full of rivers that flow north-south, but the tributaries flow east-west. The Cossacks would sail up a river, carry their boat a few miles to the next river, and keep going. Hop, skip, jump. They crossed the Urals in 1580. They reached the Yenisei River by 1619. They reached the Pacific Ocean by 1639. It took them less than 60 years to cross an entire continent. That is 4,000 miles of frozen hell conquered by guys looking for hamster skins. By the mid-1600s, Russia was now huge. But there was a catch. It was huge and useless. Okay, not useless. They made a fortune on fur. But you can't build a civilization on fur alone. Most of this land was frozen permafrost. You couldn't grow crops. You couldn't build big cities. And worst of all, Russia was landlocked. Sure, they had an ocean on the north, frozen. They had an ocean on the east, too far away. To become a real superpower, Russia needed something else. Warm water. Ports. By the mid-1600s, Russia was huge but landlocked. Imagine being the biggest guy in the gym, but you're locked inside the locker room. That was Russia. They had no way to trade with Europe. Enter Peter the Great. He was 6 feet 8 inches, super energetic, and obsessed with boats. He looked at Sweden, who was a superpower back then, and said, "I want that coast." After a brutal 21-year war, Russia won. Peter finally got his coast, but it was just a swamp. Most people would say, "Let's find dry land." Peter said, "No, I will build a city right here." On the mud, he built St. Petersburg. He called it his window to the west. Now, Russia could finally sail its ships into Europe. Next up, Catherine the Great. She looked south. She fought the Ottoman Empire, took Crimea, and secured the northern coast of the Black Sea. Now Russia had warm water ports in the south too. By the late 1700s, Russia wasn't just big. It was thick. But does being thick actually help? Well, ask this guy. In 1812, Napoleon assembled the largest army Europe had ever seen. 600,000 men. His plan was simple: march to Moscow, force the Tsar to surrender, and be home in time for croissants. But the Russians used scorched earth. As they retreated deeper into their own massive territory, they burned everything. No food, no shelter, just ash. The land was so big it was swallowing his army whole. By the time he reached Moscow, it was empty and burning. He had to retreat. And that's when the strategic depth kicked in. The long walk home killed them. Out of 600,000 men, only about 100,000 made it out alive. Russia didn't beat Napoleon with genius tactics. They beat him with geography. But sometimes, being too big is a problem. In the 1800s, Russia kept going east until they bumped into America. They owned Alaska. They even built a fort in California. But it was too far away to defend against the British. The Tsar panicked. He thought, let's sell it while we can. So, in 1867, Russia sold Alaska to the United States for $7.2 million. That's about 2 cents per acre. At the time, they thought it was a smart move. Then, America found gold. And oil. Whoops. After selling Alaska, Russia realized a scary truth. If a rebellion starts in the east, it takes the army 6 months to walk there. By the time they arrive, the rebels have already died of old age. Russia needed a spine. So they built the Trans-Siberian Railway. 5,700 miles of track. It took 25 years. Without this train, the Russian Far East probably would have been eaten by Japan. It didn't just move people, it moved Russia itself into the modern age. Fast forward to the 20th century. The Tsars collapsed. The communists took over. The Soviet Union was the peak big Russia. Stalin pushed the buffer zone even further, creating the Iron Curtain. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union was so big, they could literally hide entire cities inside it. I'm not joking. There were dozens of closed cities that did not appear on any map. They had codes like Chelyabinsk -40. Hundreds of thousands of people lived there, making nuclear weapons. Only a country with 6.6 million square miles of middle of nowhere could pull off a disappearing act this massive. They also used their size to win the space race. You see, when you launch a giant rocket, parts of it fall back down. You need a massive backyard to drop your trash. Luckily, the USSR had Kazakhstan. They launched rockets from Baikonur, and the debris landed harmlessly in the Siberian wilderness. Russia proved that their land wasn't just a frozen prison, it was a launch pad to the stars. But being big is expensive. Imagine you have to build roads, power lines, and heat apartments across 11 time zones at -40 degrees. Every ruble Russia made from oil was spent just trying to keep the lights on in Siberia. And defending the longest border in the world bankrupts you. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. The empire simply became too heavy to carry. Russia lost 2 million square miles overnight. So, Russia is small now, right? Ha, no. Even after losing all those countries, Russia is still almost twice the size of the United States. So, why is Russia so big? It's not just because they were greedy land grabbers, it's because of fear. Born on a flat, defenseless plain, Russia learned that the only defense was offense. To be safe, they expanded. To get rich, they chased furs. To trade, they fought for the seas. Today, that history is still written on the map. Russia is a fortress built of ice, forests, and sheer distance. It is a country that expanded so much it accidentally became a planet of its own. Sorry, Pluto. You're cool and all, but you're just not Russia. If you like this video, smash that subscribe button. And let me know in the comments, which country should we oversimplify next?